When the surgeon came to find me in the family room at Leeds General Infirmary at 11:30 on a Tuesday night in February and told me the bypass had gone well, I made a decision. Not immediately. Not in the family room, with the consultant still talking and my daughter Janet holding my hand and the relief washing through both of us in waves we could barely manage. But sometime in the 3 weeks I spent recovering in that ward, with the drains in my chest and the compression stockings and the physiotherapy, and the particular quality of institutional sealing that you memorize whether you want to or not when you are lying on your back for days at a time. Sometime in those 3 weeks, I decided that if I had been given more time, I was not going to spend it the way I had spent the time before. I know that every person who has ever survived something serious makes some version of that decision in some version of that hospital room. I know it is not original. I am telling you because it is where this story starts, and because understanding where it starts is the only way to understand how it ends, which is to say, with absolutely nothing. With £0 in any account bearing my name. With a non-immigrant OA visa, I could not renew because I could not produce the 800,000 baht minimum balance the immigration office required, and with a flight home to Leeds booked on a card that had approximately £340 of credit remaining. That is how this ends. Now let me tell you how it began. My name is Roger. I am 65 years old, or I was 63 when this started, and I spent 31 years as an NHS administrator at a trust in West Yorkshire. Not a glamorous career, not a highly paid one by the standards of what I eventually accumulated, but a stable one, a pensionable one, a career that rewarded patience and conscientiousness, and the ability to manage complex systems under pressure without losing your composure. I was good at it. I retired at 62, 2 years after the bypass, on a pension of £2,200 a month, plus the lump sum from downsizing the house in Headingley, 4 bedrooms that my ex-wife Claire and I had bought in 1989, and that I had lived in alone since the divorce in 2014. The house sold for considerably more than we had paid for it, which was the only financial fortune I could genuinely attribute to timing rather than discipline. And after Claire took her share and the costs were settled, I had, combined with 31 years of pension contributions and the modest ISA savings I had maintained since my mid-40s, a total of £500,000 in liquid assets. £500,000. At 62, post-bypass, post-divorce, post-career, standing in a 3-bedroom house in Headingley that I was about to sell and move out of, with no particular destination in mind. It was more money than my parents had ever imagined a person could have. It was also, I understood very clearly, all I was going to have. The pension would continue, but the capital was finite, and a man of 62 with a repaired heart and a limited horizon does not treat finite capital carelessly, or so I told myself. The idea of Thailand came from my cardiologist. Not directly, he did not say go to Thailand. What he said, at my 12-month post-bypass review, was that the data on recovery outcomes for bypass patients consistently showed better long-term results in individuals who reduced chronic stress, maintained a warm climate year-round if possible, ate a diet rich in fresh vegetables and lean protein, and found daily physical activity that was gentle and consistent rather than intensive. He said this in the dry, evidence-based way that good consultants deliver lifestyle prescriptions, and I received it in the dry way that retired NHS administrators receive clinical information, accurately, without the emotional overlay that makes most people filter it through what they want to hear. I heard, warmer climate, less stress, better diet, daily movement. I thought, that is not a description of West Yorkshire. I had never been to Southeast Asia. My holidays had been the reliable English kind. Cornwall, the Lake District. One memorable fortnight in Portugal in 2003 that Claire and I had both agreed was too hot. But I did my research, because I am the kind of man who does research. And what I found about Chiang Mai specifically was persuasive in a way that felt medical rather than romantic. The climate in the north of Thailand is different from the coast. Drier, cooler in the evenings, the rainy season manageable rather than oppressive. The food culture is genuinely vegetable-forward. The northern Thai cuisine, lighter and more herb-based than the central dishes most people imagine when they think of Thai food. The cost of living for a retiree with a solid pension was substantially lower than in the UK, and there was an established wellness community in Chiang Mai. Yoga studios, meditation retreats, health-focused guest houses, a whole infrastructure around exactly the lifestyle my cardiologist had described without naming a destination. I booked a 4-week exploratory trip in October, 18 months after the bypass. I told Janet, who had moved to Leeds city centre with her partner, and who was the person I was closest to in the world, that I was going to Thailand to look at retirement options. She looked at me for a moment and then said, "As long as you're careful, Dad." I said I would be careful. I was going to be careful. Careful was what I was. Chiang Mai received me like a city that had been waiting for someone with my specific set of requirements. The old city, ringed by its ancient moat and the remains of the original walls, had a quality of unhurried density that I found immediately appealing. The temples, the morning markets, the narrow streets behind the main roads where the neighborhood existed at human pace, the particular smell of frangipani and motorbike exhaust, and the cooking from the street stalls that operated from dawn until long after dark. The air in October, post-rainy season, was clean, and the temperature settled around 26 degrees in the afternoons and dropped to something close to cool in the evenings. I walked 4 or 5 kilometers every morning before breakfast and felt, for the first time since before the bypass, genuinely well rather than merely functional. The wellness retreat where I first encountered deer was in the Mae Rim Valley north of the city, a 15-minute drive up Route 107 into the hills where the air was noticeably cleaner and the mornings were quiet in a way that the old city, for all its pleasantness, could not match. It was a residential retreat, 5 days of structured program, yoga twice daily, Thai massage, nutrition consultations, guided meditation, and I had booked it partly for the program, and partly because the former NHS administrator in me wanted to understand the operational model of this kind of enterprise, which I found professionally interesting in the way that anyone with 30 years in health service administration finds health-adjacent services professionally interesting. Dear was the retreat coordinator. She managed the scheduling, the guest relations, the interface between the various practitioners and the guests, the smooth running of the daily program, in the way that a good administrator makes complex logistics appear effortless. She was 34, I learned this later, and she had the organized, attentive quality of someone who had learned their profession in a demanding context and had become very good at it. Her English was fluent and precise, better than functional. The English of someone who had worked extensively with international guests and had developed an instinct for communication across cultural distances. She had 2 children, a boy of 8 and a girl of 6, from a marriage that had ended 3 years earlier. She mentioned this on the second day, not to elicit sympathy, but in passing, the way someone mentions a structural fact about their life when it comes up naturally in conversation. She was living in Mae Rim, she said, close to her parents who helped with the children on the days her schedule required long hours at the retreat. She described her situation with the particular matter-of-fact quality of a person who has made their peace with a difficult circumstance through practical action rather than emotional processing, and I found this, if I am honest, more appealing than dramatic declarations of hardship would have been. I went back to Chiang Mai in January, 5 months after the first trip, during what would have been the darkest and coldest stretch of a Yorkshire winter. I landed at Chiang Mai International, on an evening when the city was cool and clear, and the mountains to the north were visible in the late light, in a way that took me slightly off guard, because I had remembered the mountains but not quite how present they were, how much of the horizon they occupied. I had booked another program at the Mae Rim retreat, 3 days this time, and on the second evening Deer and I had dinner at a restaurant in the valley that served northern Thai dishes, the khao soi, a coconut curry noodle soup that is specific to the north, rich and layered and unlike anything I had eaten before, and the saiowa, a herb-packed grilled sausage with galangal and lemongrass and kaffir lime leaf, and the nam prikong, a slow-cooked pork and tomato relish eaten with raw vegetables and sticky rice. And we talked for 3 hours about health systems and recovery, and what it meant to change the direction of a life in its later stages. The conversation was, and I want to be precise about this, the most engaged I had been intellectually since before the bypass. She was intelligent and curious, and she had an interest in health administration from the practitioner side. She knew her industry, understood its economics, had opinions about the gap between what wellness retreats delivered and what chronic health management actually required, that I found genuinely stimulating. I went back to my room in the old city guest house that evening, thinking about the conversation, not about her specifically, and told myself, accurately, that I had simply had a very good dinner with a very interesting person. By April, I had made the decision. Not about deer, not yet, about Chiang Mai. I had been back twice in 6 months. I had done the visa research thoroughly. I had spoken to a bilingual immigration advisor named Kun Wichai who practiced in Chiang Mai, and who handled the documentation for a number of long-term foreign residents in the province. The non-immigrant OA visa, Thailand's retirement visa for foreigners of 50 or over, required me to demonstrate 800,000 baht, approximately 18,200 pounds at the current rate, maintained in a Thai bank account for the duration of the stay, and available for inspection by immigration officials at annual renewal. Kun Wichai explained the process in detail: the initial application, the annual extension requirements, the 90-day reporting obligation, requiring me to present in person at the Chiang Mai Immigration Office on Mahidol Road every 90 days to confirm continued residence, the documentation each time, passport, TM, 30 residence registration from my landlord, the bank letter confirming the balance. He explained all of this clearly and gave me a written summary in English. I understood it completely. I transferred 900,000 baht into a Thai bank account in April, slightly above the minimum, which felt prudent, and began the extension process with documentation Kun Wichai assembled. By May, I had found an apartment in the Nimman area, the neighborhood west of the old city that was the most international and the most walkable of the residential options I had considered, with good coffee places and a hospital nearby. Maharaj Nakorn Chiang Mai Hospital, where I had established myself as a registered patient given the cardiac history, and a quiet street of mature trees that made the apartment cooler than its neighbors. The rent was 22,000 baht per month, approximately 500 pounds. I paid 3 months in advance, as the landlord requested. Simon, who had been in Chiang Mai for 6 years by the time I arrived, and who I met through an informal British residence gathering at a cafe on Nimman Road in my 2nd month in the city, said something to me in May that I have thought about many times since. We were walking along the canal near the old city on a Sunday morning, the slow pace of a walk between two people who are getting to know each other without urgency, and he said, not in relation to deer specifically, because I had not told him much about deer at that point, just that I had met someone at the retreat where I had been doing a program. He said that the thing about Chiang Mai was that it was the most comfortable trap in Southeast Asia. He said this with the affectionate exasperation of someone who loves a place and has watched it do the same thing to many people over many years. He said, "The weather is perfect. The food is extraordinary. The cost of living makes everything feel affordable. And the wellness community specifically attracts people who are already in a vulnerable emotional state. People recovering from something. People reinventing something. People who have decided to stop being afraid." He said those people were, in his observation, the most susceptible to making decisions that felt philosophically correct, but were financially catastrophic. He said he was not talking about me specifically. He was, of course, talking about me specifically, in the way that people make the polite grammatical choice to speak generally when they mean particularly. I said I appreciated what he was saying. I said I was being careful. I said the investment I was considering. I mentioned the retreat expansion, not the amount, not Deer's involvement, was something I had assessed with the same professional judgment I had applied to NHS contracts for 31 years. Simon looked at the canal for a moment and then said, "The difference is that in the NHS you had colleagues who could tell you were wrong." I did not have an answer to that. I changed the subject, and we walked further along the canal, and the morning was beautiful, and the mountains were clear to the north, and the Watt bells were audible from across the water, and I filed what Simon had said in the category of things I had heard and acknowledged and would not act upon. By June, Deer and I were together, I am going to state this simply because the sequence of it matters and the emotional texture of how it developed is less important for the purposes of this account than the fact of it. We had been seeing each other with increasing frequency since January, and by June the relationship had a shape and a regularity that made the word together accurate. The children came with her on weekends, and I bought them things they needed and some things they wanted, and I told myself this was simply what you did when you were with someone who had children. And this was true. It is simply what you do. And it was also the beginning of something. There was a conversation in July that I have returned to many times. We were at a cafe near the moat in the early morning before the heat built, and Dear mentioned that the wellness retreat had been discussing expanding to a second property in Mae Rim, and that the retreat director had asked if she knew anyone who might be interested in a financial partnership. An investment in the expansion, in exchange for a proportional ownership stake and a share of the revenue. She mentioned the figure, 1.8 million baht, which at the rate in July converted to approximately 41,000 pounds. She said she was not asking me to invest. She was mentioning it because she thought I might find the business model interesting from an administrative perspective. I said I would think about it. I did think about it for about 2 weeks, which in retrospect was not nearly long enough and involved no independent verification of any kind. I had visited the retreat 6 times by that point. I knew the physical space, the quality of the program, the guest demographic. I had the former NHS administrator's understanding of health facility operations, and I genuinely believed, this is not me rewriting history more favorably than it deserves, that the expansion concept was sound. I invested 41,000 pounds in July. I received a document in Thai, translated for me by Dear, in a summary I did not verify independently, describing my investment stake. It was, I later discovered, not what she described. But that discovery came much later. The cardiologist's prescription had specified reduced chronic stress. What he had not specified, because it is not something cardiologists are required to address, was the particular kind of stress that comes from being far from home, in a country whose language and legal system you do not understand, with most of your life savings in accounts that are accessible to another person. That stress does not feel like the stress of an NHS administrator managing a trust during a winter bed crisis. It feels like nothing, at first. It feels like the absence of stress, because the familiar anxieties are gone and the new vulnerabilities have not yet made themselves visible. I had given Dear access to my Thai bank account in August, not the UK accounts. Those remained untouched. The ISA, the pension deposits, but the Thai account that held the retirement visa balance and the funds I was using for living expenses. The access was practical. I was planning a 3-week trip back to Leeds in September to see Janet and to attend a follow-up cardiac review, and I wanted someone who could manage the local automatic payments, the apartment rent, the utilities, the mobile phone account, while I was away. Dear was the obvious, and, as far as I could see, the only practical choice. I gave her the internet banking credentials and the account access on a Thursday evening. I explained which payments needed to be made and when. She made notes in the organized way she made notes about everything. The wellness coordinator's habit of systematic recording. I need to stop here and say something about the 3 weeks I spent in Leeds, because they mattered, and because they tell you something about what I was carrying into this situation that I had not fully reckoned with. Janet took me to the cardiac review, which was good. The bypass was holding. The cholesterol numbers were improved. The consultant was cautiously positive in the way that cardiac consultants are cautious and positive simultaneously, measuring their language against the statistical range of outcomes, rather than the specific person in front of them. I ate dinner with Janet and her partner 3 times. I walked along the Meanwood Valley Trail twice, which I had done every week for 20 years before the bypass, and had not done since. I sat in the house I was renting in Headingley, not the old house, that was sold, a rental 2 streets away from where I had lived for 25 years, and I felt, unexpectedly and uncomfortably, the pull of familiar things. The particular gray of a Leeds October afternoon, the smell of the canal, the sound of the traffic on Otley Road. I also felt, and this is the part I am less comfortable saying, slightly relieved to be away from Chiang Mai. Not from Chiang Mai itself, from the texture of the life I was building there, from the daily requirement of navigating everything in a language I was only beginning to learn, from the specific weight of 500,000 pounds deployed in a place where I had no institutional support, no established relationships, no professional network that was mine rather than Dear's. I noticed this feeling, and I set it aside. I told myself it was the instinctive conservatism of a man who had spent 31 years in public administration and who needed time to adjust to a genuinely different way of living. I flew back to Chiang Mai at the end of September, and Dear met me at the airport with a warmth that seemed, in that moment, to answer the question I had not quite been asking. What I did not check, when I returned, was the bank account balance. This is the thing. I had been receiving the automatic notification messages from the Thai bank on my phone throughout September. Messages in Thai script that I had learned to identify as transaction notifications without being able to read the specific figures, because my Thai was still limited to the practical vocabulary of daily life and did not extend to reading bank messages in the original. I had assumed, without checking, that the payments Dear was managing were the ones I had listed, in the amounts they should have been. In October, 2 months after I had given Dear account access, something happened that I did not immediately understand. She started mentioning, with increasing frequency and in context that seemed to arrive from different directions, that her ex-husband had stopped paying the monthly child support he had been contributing, that the children's school fees were due, that her parents' house in Mae Rim needed a roof repair that could not wait through another rainy season, that her sister's medical situation, a diagnosis I could not fully follow through the translation, required expenses that the family could not cover from current income. Each of these things was presented separately, in the natural flow of conversation, not as a list of demands, but as the ongoing texture of a life with complications. She did not ask me directly for money in any of these conversations, she reported, and I, who had survived a heart bypass and decided that life was too short for caution, responded to the reporting by offering 22,000 baht for the school fees, 35,000 baht for the roof repair. I did not see the roof repair. It was on a property I had never visited. The parents lived in a part of Mae Rim that was off the tourist route, and that Dear described as too inconvenient for me to travel to given my heart condition, though the drive was 20 minutes. 40,000 baht for the sister's medical situation, which resolved more quickly than medical situations usually resolve, and was not mentioned again after the money was transferred. Each amount was a few £100s, individually manageable, individually reasonable within the context of the relationship and the country and the culture. I understood, or told myself I understood, that bun kun, the Thai concept of obligation and gratitude within family networks, the deep reciprocal duty that structures Thai social relationships in ways that Westerners often misread as financial opportunism, meant that Dear's family obligations were genuine and structural rather than instrumental. I was not wrong about the concept. I was wrong about its application to my specific situation. By November, the mood at the Nimman apartment had changed in a way I could feel without being able to describe precisely. Dear was present but less present, engaged but differently engaged, attentive in the professional way of someone who is managing a situation rather than the personal way of someone who is simply with you. I noticed this, and I told myself she was under family pressure, that the accumulated weight of the children and the ex-husband and the sister and the parents was showing in the way that weight shows on anyone when it accumulates past a manageable point. I was not wrong about this either. She was under pressure. The pressure was partly of her own construction and partly real, and I could not, from inside the relationship, tell the difference. There was an evening in November. I remember it clearly because I had been to the night bazaar on Chiang Klan Road for the first time since arriving, and I had bought a piece of carved teak that I had been looking at for 3 visits, a small elephant, and I was pleased with myself about it in the way you are pleased with yourself about small purchases that feel like belonging. When I came back to the apartment and Dear was on the phone in the bedroom, and she did not come out for 20 minutes after I returned. When she came out, she was composed but slightly distracted, and I asked if everything was all right, and she said her ex-husband had been in contact again about something related to the children, that it was complicated, that she would tell me later. She did not tell me later. I did not ask again, because asking again felt like pressing, And I had decided, somewhere along the way, that pressing was not something I did anymore. Life was too short for pressing. That decision, the decision that survival meant openness, and openness meant not pressing, and not pressing meant not asking the questions that needed to be asked, is the specific failure at the center of this story. Not the investment, not the account access, not the transfers. The philosophy. The philosophy I had built in a hospital ward in Leeds while staring at an institutional ceiling, the philosophy that had felt, for 18 months, like wisdom, turned out to be a permission structure. Permission to trust without verifying. Permission to give without accounting. Permission to proceed without asking whether what was happening was what I thought was happening. There was something else I noticed in November that I should tell you, because it belongs in the account even though it is the kind of detail that is easy to dismiss as small, and which I did dismiss as small at the time. I had logged into the Thai bank's internet portal. I did this irregularly, perhaps once every 2 or 3 weeks, because Dear was managing the day-to-day, and the balance shown was lower than I expected, not dramatically lower. The 900,000 baht I had maintained as the retirement visa cushion showed a balance of 810,000 baht, which was above the 800,000 minimum, and which had a coherent explanation: the quarterly retreat investment payment I had authorized in the original agreement, and some ordinary living costs that had accumulated in the weeks I was not checking regularly. I looked at the balance, registered that it was above the threshold, and closed the portal. I did not look at the individual transaction lines. I had the NHS administrator's familiarity with high-level figures, and the NHS administrator's instinct to trust the systems around him, which in the NHS context was reasonable, because the systems had internal controls. In the Nimman apartment in Chiang Mai, it was not reasonable at all, but it felt the same, and feelings that feel familiar are the hardest ones to question. Then came December, and everything changed. Though I would not understand how everything had changed until January. The second heart episode came in December. Not a new bypass. Nothing structural had failed. The bypass was holding. This was an arrhythmia, a prolonged irregular heartbeat that my cardiologist in Leeds had told me to watch for, and that presented one evening while I was cooking, and sent me to the Maharaj Nakorn hospital in a taxi with Dear beside me, her hand on my arm, her manner calm and clear in the emergency, in a way that I was grateful for, and that I remember being grateful for, even in the middle of the physical fright of it. The treatment was straightforward. A medication adjustment, 24 hours of observation, a recommendation to reduce physical exertion for 2 weeks. I was discharged the following afternoon. During the 2 weeks of reduced exertion that followed, Dear managed everything. The apartment, the food, the medication schedule, the 90-day immigration report that fell due in January and that she attended on my behalf with a letter from my cardiologist confirming I was under active medical supervision and temporarily unable to attend in person. A provision that exists under Thai immigration guidelines for documented medical incapacity, and that Kun Wichai had confirmed was acceptable, though it required additional documentation. She managed all of this with the efficiency she brought to the retreat operations, and I was, genuinely, grateful. I told her I was grateful. I meant it. What I did not know during those 2 weeks was that she had made 4 transfers from the Thai bank account that I had not authorized. Not small transfers. The first was 680,000 baht. The second, a week later, was 520,000 baht. The third, 2 days after that, was 340,000 baht. The fourth, 10 days before my January immigration report fell due, was the balance, 410,000 baht. Total, 1,950,000 baht, which at the exchange rates applying across those transfers worked out to approximately 44,600 pounds from the Thai account alone. But the Thai account was not the only account she had access to by the time January arrived. The investment stake document I had signed in July, the one Dear had translated in summary, the one I had not verified independently, had included, in the untranslated body of its Thai text, a section that was not about the wellness retreat investment at all. Kun Wichai later described it, with the careful precision of a lawyer who is delivering information that will cause pain and who cannot do anything to reduce it, as a limited financial power of attorney, with a scope that extended to the UK bank accounts I had listed in the asset disclosure section of a form I had filled out as part of the investment due diligence process. I had listed my UK accounts because the investment form asked for an overview of total assets, and I had provided it accurately and completely, which was the kind of honest, thorough response that 31 years of public administration had made automatic. I had thereby provided, in a form I had signed, the account numbers, sort codes, and asset values of my ISA and the holding account that received my NHS pension. By the time January's 90-day immigration report fell due, £287,000 had been transferred from my UK accounts through a chain of international transfers that Kun Wichai spent 2 weeks reconstructing with the help of a financial investigator. The transfers had been authorized using the power of attorney, which was, in the legal framework in which it had been executed, valid. The Thai account was empty. The UK accounts had been reduced from £459,000 to £172,000. I went to the Chiang Mai immigration office on Mahidol Road for the 90-day report on a Wednesday morning in January, in the early weeks of the new year. While the mountains to the north were visible in the clear, cool air of the dry season in their particular blue-gray way that I had come to find, over the preceding months, genuinely beautiful. The immigration officer was courteous and efficient, and she asked for the bank letter confirming the minimum balance of 800,000 baht in my Thai account. I produced the letter, which I had picked up from the bank branch in Nimman the previous morning. She looked at it, and then she looked at me, and she said, very quietly, that the balance shown on this letter was 14,600 baht, not 814,600 baht, not 900,000 baht, 14,600 baht. I stared at the letter for what I think was a very long time. I remember the immigration office very clearly. The cream-colored walls, the number system for queuing, the window where you waited while your documents were processed, the officer's desk with its neat arrangement of stamps and folders, the particular coolness of the air conditioning after the warmth of the street outside. I remember thinking, with a steadiness that surprised me, that the letter was correct and that this was what had happened, and that I needed to understand the shape of it before I could respond to any of it. The officer told me, gently and without any drama, that the extension could not be approved on a balance of 14,600 baht, and that I had 30 days to either produce documentation of the required balance or depart Thailand. I thanked her. I took my passport. I walked outside into the dry season morning. I called Kun Wichai from the pavement outside the immigration building. He was at his office in 20 minutes. I was there in 15. Dear was not at the Nimman apartment when I returned that evening. Her things were gone. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Not a scene of emptied drawers and absent furniture. But the small accumulations of a person's presence were absent. The phone charger she left on the kitchen counter. The particular moisturizer on the bathroom shelf. The children's drawings that had been on the refrigerator. Gone. Quietly, efficiently, in the manner of someone who plans an exit the way they plan a retreat program, with attention to logistics and without unnecessary drama. I sat in the apartment with a piece of paper and a pen, and I wrote down every number I could access. The Thai account, 14,600 baht, approximately £330 at the current rate. The UK ISA, £97,400. I accessed this online, and the figure appeared on the screen with a factual neutrality that was somehow worse than shouting would have been. The UK pension holding account, £74,600. The retreat investment of £41,000, unrecoverable, as Kun Wichai later established, because the investment document was not what I had been told it was, and the entity I had invested in was registered in a name that proved difficult to trace and had no recoverable assets. Total remaining, £172,000 from accounts, plus £330 from Thailand, against an original £500,000. Net loss, £327,670, across the Thai account and the UK transfers. Every penny of it gone through transactions that bore either my signature or authorization I had provided in documents I had not read. Simon, a British expat I had met through the Chiang Mai British residence group who had been in the city for 8 years, and who had the patient, slightly weathered quality of someone who had seen several versions of this story, came to the apartment the evening after I found the accounts empty. He did not say he had warned me, because he had not warned me. I had not given him the opportunity to warn me, had not told him enough about the financial arrangements for him to have had anything specific to warn about. He sat with me, and we drank Thai beer, which is cold and not strong, and suited the evening. And after a while he said, "The question is what you do now." I said I knew what I did now. I went home. The departure from Chiang Mai was not dramatic. I packed 2 suitcases, which was everything I had accumulated in 14 months in the Nimman apartment, and I found it was less than I expected. The carved teak elephant went in the larger case, wrapped in a shirt. I did not know why I kept it. I kept it. I took a songthyo, the red shared pickup trucks that serve as Chiang Mai's local transport, to the airport rather than a taxi, because the songthyo cost 40 baht and the taxi cost 250, and I was, by that point, thinking about money differently than I had thought about it since before the bypass. Janet met me at Leeds Bradford Airport. She did not ask what had happened on the phone because I had told her, factually and without extensive emotion, what had happened. And she is her father's daughter, and she had processed the facts and arrived at the practical response, which was to book a room for me in a guest house near her flat in the city center, and not to say anything at the arrivals gate except that she was glad I was back and that we would deal with it. I am back in Leeds now. Not Headingley. I cannot afford Headingley. Not with £172,000 remaining, and no house, and a pension that covers necessities, and not much beyond them. I am renting a flat in Burleigh, which is close enough to Janet to be practical and cheap enough to be sustainable. I am 65 years old, and I am not poor, in the absolute sense, but I am not secure in the way that I was secure before I left. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a choice and a constraint. The relief, the exhausted, undramatic, barely articulable relief, is the strangest part to explain to people who expect the story to end with anger or grief. But it is what I feel most consistently when I am honest about it. The uncertainty is over. The thing I could not quite see was still happening. The thing I was half sensing and not confronting for months in Chiang Mai, it is over. It happened, and it is done, and I am back in a city I know, in a country whose systems I understand, with a daughter who is kind and practical and 20 minutes away by bus. There is a relief in that which is hard to argue with, even though its cost was substantial. There are things I understand now that I want to say clearly, because saying them clearly is the only productive use of this story. Surviving something serious does not give you wisdom about money. It gives you a different relationship to risk, and a different relationship to risk is not the same thing as better judgment. What happened to me was that I confused the willingness to take risks with the competence to evaluate them. I stopped being afraid of the wrong things, the fear of not living fully, the fear of another hospital ward, the fear of a gray Yorkshire retirement. And in losing those fears, I lost the vigilance that sat alongside them. The fears and the vigilance were not the same thing. Losing one did not require losing the other. I did not understand this distinction, and it cost me. A financial power of attorney given to any person, partner, family member, trusted colleague, that extends to overseas accounts you did not intend to include, is a document that can empty everything you have. A document you sign that you have not read, in a language you do not speak, has whatever power it was written to have, regardless of what you were told it said. These two things together, without independent legal verification at every stage, represent a vulnerability that no amount of trust closes. Trust and verification are not opposites. They can coexist. The version of trust that requires the absence of verification is not trust. It is exposure. The non-immigrant OA renewal system I now understand extremely well, from the wrong direction. The annual extension requires a bank letter showing 800,000 baht continuously maintained. If the account is emptied, the extension fails, and you have 30 days to comply or depart. This is a perfectly rational system, and it is also, for a person whose account has been emptied by someone with access, a deadline that arrives without warning, and with nowhere to go except home. Know the system before you need it. Know who has access to the account that sustains it. These are not complicated things to know. They are just things I did not verify at the moment that mattered. And the last thing, the one I keep coming back to in the flat in Burley with the bus, to Janet's 15 minutes away, and the teak elephant on the shelf, and the view of the street that is different from every street view I had in Chiang Mai, but which is mine. In a way, those views were not. The cardiologist was right that surviving something changes what you value. He was right that the rest of life should not be lived the same way as the life before. He was not wrong. What he could not have specified, what nobody could have specified, because it is not a medical instruction, is that changing what you value does not mean abandoning the judgment you spent 63 years building. The bypass was not a reason to start again from zero. It was a reason to continue, differently. I took it as permission to discard everything I had learned, including the things that had been protecting me. I am 65. I have £172,000 and a pension, and a daughter who is 20 minutes away by bus, and a teak elephant on the shelf in a flat in Burley that I look at sometimes and cannot decide whether to keep or give away. The elephant cost me 400 baht at the night bazaar on Chiang Klan Road. That part of it, at least, I got right. It is a very good elephant. I do not know the answer to that yet. To the elephant, or to most of the rest of it. But I am here, and the bus runs on time, and Janet is 20 minutes away, and for now that is enough to be going on with.